Hello, Friday the 13th fans, and welcome to my review of Friday the 13th, Part 3, during my Halloween special of all things. Yeah, this wasn't the plan. Obviously, I've been doing the Corpse Party game as my plan, but it is Friday the 13th, and just because it's during my Halloween special, that doesn't mean we can ignore my boy Jason, on this special day. So, last time, I probably, if it was during the Halloween, if I haven't started the Halloween special yet, it was probably maybe like a Scooby-Doo Let's Play or Scooby-Doo Review, Where Are You Review, from Scooby Month, or it was, the beginning of my Corpse Party Let's Play, whichever one of those it is. I hope you guys enjoyed all whatever the last video was. And obviously today I'll be covering Friday the 13th Part 3, which was released on August 13th, 1982. So hey, we finally got a Friday. And since it's Friday the 13th, we can't ignore, we gotta get our boy Jason up in here with his hockey mask. So, the short synopsis of the film is in the third installment in the Friday the 13th series. This picks up on the day after the carnage from Part 2, with the homicidal maniac Jason Voorhees stealing some clothes and killing a local store owner. Meanwhile, Chris and her sometimes boyfriend Rick are hosting a group of teenage friends at Chris's lake house. Despite a run-in with a local biker gang, they enjoy an amicable weekend together. That is, until Jason begins knocking off the kids and bikers alike. So, let's, before we, start the review, I'm sure you guys, I have a couple things to address. So, I have two things of DVDs right here. So, obviously, I've shown this before on my reviews. The 8-movie collection. Here's a better look at it. This is where, like I say, I totally recommend this if you want to get the experience of all the Friday movies. Now, unfortunately, before we get into that unfortunate part, I want to mention that Friday the 13th Part 3, you may be wondering, yeah, it's in 3D. It's in 3D of all that, but it's that old school 3D. So, there is a 2D and 3D version. So it actually incorporated the 3D version. So you don't need to wear the stupid red and blue glasses. But unfortunately, it's not a complete 3D, updated 3D render. It's still the red and blue 3D. So it's the same as if you were wearing the glasses, except you're not wearing them. You're just watching it through. So before I go, I should probably since there's two versions, I should probably tell you, is it worth watching the 2D or the 3D version? Well, I would say this. If you want to watch the movie just story-wise, you want to pay attention, to what happens to the characters and Jason and all that. If you really want to pay attention, maybe on like a first-time viewing, I would suggest the 2D version. Because the 2D version is easier on the eyes and easier to watch. But the 3D version I would recommend for if you want to you don't really give a shit about the story. Like, you just want to see Jason kill people, or you're just there to goof around and with your friends, or you're by yourself, or you're not really paying attention and you just want to see the kills. Or if you want to experience the movie how it was originally intended, then watch the 3D version. I personally, I think because I watched both versions, so I did watch Friday the 13th Part 3 twice, and it wasn't an easy experience, but I did prefer the 2D version. I think that's easier on the eyes, it's more better. I will say the 3D version was cool to finally see, and it was nice that it had that option in the 8-movie collection, because I don't know if I would have, I didn't know if I was going to get the glasses, or if I was going to if there wasn't even going to be a 3D version. I didn't even think the collection was going to have it, but thankfully it did, and that was cool. I really liked that it had that. So you at least get the choice, but I prefer the 2D version. It's easier on the eyes, but the 3D version was cool to experience. And I guess if you want a new experience with the movie, And if you've never seen it in 3D, go right ahead, knock yourself out, watch it. But me personally, I would recommend the 2D version, because I remember after watching the 3D version, it was a strain on the eyes. You get used to it after a little bit, but it fucking was a strain on your eyes after you watch that thing. It's definitely not easy on the eyes, but some kills popped out pretty good, so I will say the 3D was pretty good in some points. Not everything looked good, but some parts look pretty good. Now, the second thing I like to mention is that if you get this collection, there is a slight downfall. And this is what I was about to mention earlier before I went in my 2D and 3D version, explanation. This collection only has one special feature, and that's the theatrical trailer. Now, the thing is, you might be wondering, well, that's it? That's all that the 8 movie collection has? Well, in my collection, it does. I don't know if this is every 8 movie collection, doesn't have it. I don't know if the one I bought just didn't have the special features. I kind of doubt it, because that'd be really weird. So, for some odd reason, this 8 movie collection does not have the rest of the special features. So in order to find it, you'll have to get another Friday the 13th Part 3 DVD. And if you want to watch special features, I would recommend getting this Blu-ray of Friday the 13th Part 3. Here it is. And so this is the 40th anniversary limited edition. It's pretty good. It's nice and cool, and it has nice little artwork in here. So if you do want to watch special features, you're gonna have to get the Blu-ray for Friday the 13th Part 3. It sucks that you have to get another DVD just to watch the special features, but yeah, it has the special features that should have been on the 8 movie collection but weren't on there for some reason. So, the special features that are listed here is you have Fresh Cuts 3D Terror, you have Legacy of the Mask, you have Slasher Films Going for the Jugular, Lost Tales from Camp Blood Part 3, and then of course you have the original theatrical trailer, which you could watch, but the movie collection's got it too, so you could just watch it on there. So yeah, this is the 40th anniversary limited edition. I would recommend this. It's pretty easy buy. It's not that much money. It's just about the same amount as money as the 8 movie collection. But it is a shame that you have to get the Blu-ray to even see the special features. I think that's pretty stupid. I don't know why the 8 movie collection didn't have it, but nonetheless, that's what I would recommend get it. But I would say still get the 8 movie collection, because you rather have all 8 movies all right in the palm of your hand rather than getting each individual movie, and you only have to go out of the way for Part 3. The rest of the movies on the collection all have the special features. I kind of was worried because I didn't see any special features on the 8 movie collection. I was like, is there no special features on the back of this thing? Which, no, there wasn't. It was just a theatrical trailer. But I was able to get the special features for it, so I will be talking about those later. But yeah, our boy Jason is sporting the hockey mask this time. And this is actually the Part 3 mask that I got at I believe, a Spirit Halloween store. I fucking love how this mask looks. But yeah, our boy Jason is back at it, and he's finally sporting the hockey mask, which is really cool. Now, I should warn you guys that for the purposes of this review, I will be using the 3D version, mainly because I kind of forgot to record the 2D version, and I wanted to maybe give you guys the experience. Maybe give you a teaser of show you guys what the 3D's like and if it's your style. So if the red and blue 3D is too much for you, just skip forward to my special features section and you can go on to there. If you're willing to hear me out and watch the review, even if it's a strain on your eyes, then stick around, and I would appreciate that. It is a bit wary on the eyes, but once you get used to it, it's fine. But yeah, I recorded it because I wanted to give you guys the authentic experience of what it was like, and maybe let you guys, show you guys it, and let you guys determine for yourself whether you guys think the 3D version is worth watching. But I also just forgot to record the 2D version, so yeah. But anyway, so I believe Friday the 13th fans aren't too fond of this film. Apparently it was very big back in the day, from what I understand from the special features and from a lot of people back then. But Friday the 13th Part 3, in retrospect, is not viewed as highly as some of the other Friday movies. It's not seen as a very it's not viewed highly. People see it as kind of forgettable and average. It's kind of like a movie where it's just like, it exists, it's there, but it's nothing special. But am I that way? Do I think Friday the 13th Part 3, especially after the first two films, where you had the first film, which was average but good and is rewatchable, and the second film, which is fantastic in every way and I can rewatch anytime, is Part 3 really that average and forgettable? Is it really worth fans' time to go back to it? Well, why don't we take a look at the film to see whether I think it's a good or bad Friday the 13th film, and see if our boy Jason does a good job with this time sporting the hockey mask and in his one and only 3D outing. So, without further ado, let's get started, guys. The movie begins the day after the events of Friday the 13th Part 2, in which the horribly deformed mass murderer named Jason Voorhees survived having a machete slammed in his shoulder by the sole survivors of his brutal killing spree, Jenny and Paul, who worked at the nearby summer camp Packanack Lodge. And before the movie started, we get basically like a message saying, you won't need your 3D glasses for this part of the movie, but after this recap, you will need them, which is only prevalent if you're watching the 3D version of the movie. If you're watching the 2D version, it really doesn't matter, but if you're watching the 3D version, then yeah. But thanks for reminding us it's a 3D movie. And don't worry, there'll be plenty of moments where they'll remind us it's a 3D movie. So Jason comes upon a small country store owned by a middle-aged couple, Edna and Harold Hockett. He easily murders both of them while sneaking around, and he steals some new clothes and makes his way to a lakefront property called Higgins Haven, where he would take further bloody revenge on our new batch of teenagers, our new group. So meanwhile, we are introduced to a fresh new group of teenagers on their way to Higgins Haven, consisting of Chris Higgins, the heroine of this adventure, who was attacked by a mysterious deformed man in the woods near Higgins Haven 2 years prior, and is returning to Higgins Haven in a desperate attempt to surpass her memories from the attack. They'll show this a little bit later, but it's going to be... I'll say what I have to say when that time comes, when she talks about it. Then you have, along with Chris, you have some of her friends, including a pregnant chick named Debbie, her boyfriend Andy, Andy's roommate Shelly, who's the prankster of the group, and you also got a stoner couple named Chuck and Chili. And I just love how there's a girl named Chili. Like, too bad she doesn't eat chili throughout this movie. But she does act chill, so maybe that's why her name's Chili. Also along the way was a blind date for Shelley that the group had set up for him with a very spunky girl named Vera. So the group of teenagers come upon, as they're driving past the murder scene of Edna and Harold, they come upon a strange man named Abel lying in the middle of the road. And he's our new Ralph. And he's not a very good replacement for Ralph. He's just not as interesting. And clearly they thought so too, because they didn't bring him back for any more sequels. So this was a failed attempt. And Abel speaks incoherently and warns the teenagers about the area and tells them of a hidden stash of body parts, and he shows them a severed human eyeball. The teenagers, who are all appalled at the sight of this human eyeball, pile back into their van and speed off, leaving the man urging them to turn back and leave in dusk, with him putting the fucking eye near the camera. If you, no thank you, please put that back. It actually doesn't look too bad in the 3D, if I'm being honest, but I didn't need to see that. And they ignore the man's warnings, and they arrive at Hingenhagen, where they find it is a very serene lakefront residence with a sparkling lake and a large 2-story cabin with a barn. And you better get used to that barn, because that barn's going to be fucking shown a lot. And you may recognize the setting of Part 3, as it's a very prevalent map in the Friday the 13th game, and I'm sure a lot of people have played that. So while the rest of the group goes skinny dipping, Chris heads inside the cabin to check it out, and she's suspicious at first, but she finds that her boyfriend named Rick is inside and that he's already arrived. So all the teenagers are pretty much oblivious to Jason hiding out in the barn, and later Shelly pulls a practical joke later on that crosses the line and infuriates Chris and the rest of the group by faking his death by putting a machete or fake machete in his head. And so Vera decides she's going to go to the store in Rick's car, and Shelly pleads with her to allow him to tag along, and Vera reluctantly agrees. And I like that, she's willing to take him despite what he did. And I like seeing their relationship grow throughout the movie. So at the store, Vera and Shelly run into a troublesome biker gang consisting of their leader named Ollie, his sidekick named Loco, and this biker chick named Fox. And Fox is pretty memorable. I'm sure you guys recognize her also from the game, as well as Shelly. So after a brief scuffle inside the store with Fox trying to teach manners to Vera and taunting her about Shelly's condom in his fucking wallet, as Shelly and Vera are about to leave, Ollie exits the store and vandalizes Rick's car, punching in the windows, because Shelly accidentally backs into their motorcycles, and so he does that as payback for doing that. So Shelly wants to get revenge for them doing that, and so he runs over the bikers' motorcycles again, on purpose this time, for their harassment, and speeds away. And he and Vera cheer in victory, and that good for them, honestly. Those bikers were assholes anyway, so they deserved it. But nothing's going to compare to how they respond to that revenge later on. So the duo arrives back at the cabin, and Rick is shocked, upset, and angry to see his car beaten up. And I can't say I blame him, because if I let my friend borrow my car and it came back with a fucking windshield broken, I wouldn't be surprised that he's very not only shocked about it, but not very happy about what they did to his car. And so Chris and Rick decide to go for a drive to allow Rick to cool down, since he originally just wanted to leave and get out of there after what happened. But Chris convinces him to stay, and they decide to go cool off. He decides to go cool off with her and get some space from the rest of the group. Meanwhile, you have the troublesome biker gang right back at it again, and they arrive at the property somehow. They must have followed them somehow, or were able to catch up to Shelly and Vera, plotting to siphon gas from the teenager's van. But unbeknownst to them, Jason has other plans in mind, as he quickly dispatches a fox when she goes to explore the barn. And Loco is next to be killed by Jason when he goes into the barn to look for her. And Jason pretty much impales him with a pitchfork in his midsection, the same way he did the fox in her throat. And Ollie goes in the barn after his gang to discover their corpses, and Jason appears at the site of it. Ollie attempts to fight him, but he's easily overtaken and presumably killed as the maniac bludgeons him with a large metal wrench. And they don't, and I just want to mention this, even though they were planning to siphon gas, they were planning to burn the fucking barn over their motorcycles being trampled. That's really fucking, petty and dumb, because that's like way over the line and not necessary. Like, it just goes to show how these guys are like being over dramatic about it, and they're not interesting either in the slightest. Like, even though Fox is memorable for some of her lines and how the way she looks, they're pretty boring, and they're a pretty useless batch of side characters that really weren't necessary to the story and could have just fucking been forgotten already. But considering it's too early to kill everybody, Jason just fucking chills out in that barn instead of getting rid of everybody. Except for the fucking bikers, because they decided to come into the barn. It's like the barn is like the slaughterhouse. So night falls and Jason springs into action finally. Thank God. This movie was starting to get boring with him just fucking chilling out in a barn for half of the movie. And Shelley desperately wants Vera to like him, and he resorts to pulling another joke on her by donning a wet suit, the hockey mask, and a spear gun. And as Vera's sitting on the edge of the dock, Shelley grabs her foot from underneath the water, scarring her effectively. And then Vera tells Shelley off, and with Shelley being hurt, he sulks away into the barn where Jason off-screen attacks him and steals his hockey mask and spear gun. This is a pretty good scene because it shows how Shelley, even though despite him being a prankster, he is lovable, and he doesn't do it because like he's trying to be an asshole. He's doing it because he wants attention. And it feels like he's the only guy getting really much attention in this movie, considering the rest of the cast are boring as shit, as to be quite honest. I'll get into in my outro which characters are more interesting than the others, but Shelley and Vera are definitely my favorite of the pack, as they just are shown very well, and this scene really encapsulated it because it just does a good job of showing that Vera isn't pushing him away, and that she is willing to try something out with Shelley. She just wasn't sure if she wanted to yet. And Shelley just wants to be loved, just wants to be cared for. So Vera realizes she still has Shelley's wallet in her pocket. So she, opens it up, looks at a picture of a photo of him and his mom, and she kind of, starts to feel something for him, which is good. I like seeing that. And she accidentally drops it into the lake, and she goes into the lake to retrieve it. And now donning Shelley's mask and spear gun, the newly hockey mask Jason, after fucking 2 movies of no hockey mask Jason, we finally get him, and he approaches Vera and fires a spear into her eye, killing her as well. What a great introduction to this character. Really great to just have him put on the hockey mask and get right to work to kill the characters that we actually want to see kill.
Hey, I dropped your wallet. I'm sorry. I got it. Who are you? What are you doing? Hey, now cut that out right now. That's not funny.
So the most boring couple in this movie, Debbie and Andy, decide to go upstairs and have their sexy time, and Jason enters the cabin, and now using Shelley's hockey mask to cover his, face. And afterwards, Debbie takes a shower after their little sexy time. And Andy goes to fetch a beer while performing a handstand, because I guess he could just do that now. But before he can even reach the stairs, he encounters Jason, who vertically swings a machete into Andy's crotch and slices him in half. Oof. Fucking hell, man. Jason's brutal with that kill. Definitely was not expecting that. And don't worry, this won't be the last nutsack kill that we get in Friday the 13th, as we'll get another one very soon. Not in this movie, but very close. Jason sure loves to be graphic at certain points, I'll say that. But I can't say I blame him for his creative and good kills, because that's what I'm here to see. So Debbie gets out of the shower, and she goes to rest in the hammock, to read a magazine. Pretty cool fact, actually. On the magazine, I don't know if you guys know this, but Godzilla is actually on that magazine, and I love that that Godzilla's on it. It's kind of cool to see a little picture of Godzilla in a Friday the 13th movie, considering I'm a big Godzilla fan and love his movies. So seeing that was kind of a nice little nugget, for me, and a nice little cameo for me. Only for blood to drip down onto the magazine, so she's wondering where it's coming from, and looking up, she discovers Andy's mutilated corpse hanging from the rafters, and before she can even scream out, Jason drives a kitchen knife through her fucking chest from underneath the hammock and kills her. Yeah, fuck yeah, we get like a nice little callback to Kevin Bacon kill. Probably not as awesome as Kevin Bacon's kill, but I will say it is a nice twist on it. I do love the kill, and it's a classic kill. You can't beat it. Well, there is another one that's just as classic, but I'll talk about that one eventually.
Where's this coming from?
Meanwhile, unaware of the carnage, Chris and Rick stop the car and get out to talk to each other, where Chris finally tells Rick of her incident 2 years ago. In a very boring and drawn-out sequence where she says that she had a very bad argument with her parents and she ran away from home in order to teach them a lesson, in her own words. And then a strange, deformed man attacked her in the woods with a knife, and somehow she managed to escape him alive. And she could not tell it in a more duller way. It does not interest me at all in the slightest, this backstory. It just feels dull, and it also doesn't... It conflicts with not only the timeline for Jason, but I've never liked what this scene implies, because, like how they imply that Jason might have killed the dog in part 2, there seems to be an implication by fans that Jason might have raped Chris in the woods, and I don't like that implication at all. It ruins Jason's character for me and isn't all about Jason. I understand it's early in the franchise and they don't know... they didn't know what they were planning for Jason's character, and part 4 is really where they knew what Jason's sweet spot was and what worked for him. But still, I've never liked that implication. I hope there's better theories out there for it. I kind of just would... there are theory videos out there. I haven't watched them. But the main one I see online of that fucking scene, or theory on that scene, is that that's what he did to Chris. And I just don't... I don't like that. I think it ruins his character. And it's just a boring story and conflicts with not only Jason's mythology, but... It just doesn't give you sympathy for Chris at all, because she doesn't tell it in a meaningful. She hasn't shown any. She hasn't shown much personality beforehand to get me invested in the story, and she says it in a very dull way too. So Rick tries to start the car again, but the engine fails, and they're forced to walk back. How convenient. So back at the cabin, Chuck and Chili are having a nice little romance with each other, and when suddenly the lights are going out, and so Chili tells Chuck to go head to the basement to check the fuse box, and Jason is there waiting for him. And when he turns it on and gets the power restored, Jason pushes Chuck towards the fuse box, killing him by electrocution. But he also restores the power to the cabin. Chili then finds Shelly agonizing with his throat badly slashed, and it's very gruesome and very very bloody. It's too bad we didn't get a good kill for Shelly. I would have loved to have seen it. At first, she believes it to be another prank by Shelly, and she tells him, get the fuck up. Stop playing around. Joke's over. But soon, she finds it all to be real, and she flees in horror as she finds, as off-screen, she goes upstairs to go find Debbie and Andy, presumably finding their bodies. And she encounters Jason, who fucking picked up a fireplace poker, red flaming hot, and he kills her by impaling her in the stomach with this fireplace poker. And instead of just running out the door, Chili just is like, oh my god, wind! Oh, I can't go out there! Oh, well, why don't I just get fucking killed by Jason with a fireplace poker? Yeah, great job. Should have went... You really couldn't go out that way? I mean, maybe she thought someone was coming in, but it was really stupid. Come on, Chili, you're better than that. You've been more entertaining than the main cast. You've been one of the more entertaining members of the cast. At least act a little bit better than that. So Chris and Rick arrive at the cabin, and they go inside, finding the cabin to be quiet and empty, with the food burning and smoking on the stove. And they find it odd for that all this stuff is, there's a burning popcorn and on the, that's smoking on the stove, and everything's quiet and empty for this house that's populated by happy-go-lucky teenagers. So Rick, who's now puzzled, decides he's going to go look around outside while Chris goes upstairs, and she finds a bathtub filled with blood and Chili's blood-stained clothing. The terror still really hasn't hit Chris yet, and she runs downstairs to look for Rick, unaware that Jason is killing him. And you would think that she'd be able to see his fucking feet kicking up, I mean, I assume Rick was kicking his legs with all his might. The fact that Chris wasn't looking to her left just shows how fucking incompetent she is if she can't even be aware of her surroundings. Jason kills Rick by crushing his head with his bare hands until one of Rick's eyeballs burst out of its socket. Oh, this is so fucking good. It's corny as hell, yeah. It's fucking goofy, but that's what I'm here for. Friday the 13th. I'm here for the cheese. Let's bring it all out. I want to see some great kills. I don't care how cheesy it is. I don't care how unrealistic it is. I want some fucking goofy kills. I want something you haven't given me before. And the eyeball kill actually looks pretty good in 3D. It actually doesn't look too bad, even though the red and blue 3D is fucking eye straining and it hurts my eyes. But it's definitely probably the best kill in the movie. It's probably the most entertaining part of the whole movie is just Rick getting his eye popped out of his eye socket. So Chris goes outside to go look for her boyfriend again and finds Loco's mutilated corpse hanging from a tree. And she's horrified because she just found a fucking stranger's body out of nowhere. She's probably wondering who the fuck is this guy. And she runs back inside and tries to barricade the door and lock the windows, and she's calling for Rick, wondering where the hell he is. And suddenly, like every other Friday the 13th movie, we get the awesome corpse toss into the window as Rick's corpse is tossed through the window. And we don't get to see his eyeball, unfortunately. I wish we would have. I would have loved to see him with no eyeball. And Jason gains entry into the cabin from the window. And Chris starts running from Jason by going upstairs and dropping an entire bookshelf on the killer to stall him. And where does she decide to hide? Why, in the closet, of course, where she finds Debbie's corpse. Yeah, not the best spot. But to be fair, it's a trope, so you might. And it's early '80s slashers, trope. So, although it's stupid and it doesn't make logical sense, I mean, there's not much else she can really go to. Although she could have just not fucking screamed so loudly and given away her position. Because once she does, then Jason begins to hack his way into the closet. But Chris, uses the kitchen knife from Debbie's corpse to wound Jason's left hand when he's trying to open the door, and his right knee when she starts attacking him. And Jason makes these weird fucking grunts and groans of pain. And I don't really want to hear Jason do that because it's really not... It doesn't feel like Jason. Like, Jason just needs to show that he's in pain. I don't need to hear his grunts of pain from coming out of him. It just feels off. So Jason, putting that target practice to good use, I see, throws the kitchen knife back at Chris, nearly hitting her, which is pretty fucking cool how close he gets to hitting her. Even though she knows that the doors isn't opening, she just keeps trying to push the fucking door open. And she then manages to smash a second-story window with a chair to escape out that way, which is pretty dangerous. And Jason sees her doing that and grabs her through the window and tries to pull her back up, but he fails because part of her jacket rips off and she falls down. And so as Jason goes outside to search for her, Chris hits the back of his head with a wood log and flees in her van, which is pretty cool. At least Chris is starting to, stand up to her attacker and get some nice moments. This is probably the best Chris gets, and honestly, and there's some dumb moments, but there's some good moments for Chris in this finale. And halfway in the dirt road, Chris sees Jason as she's driving away and tries to run him over, but he just jumps sideways to evade the incoming van like he's playing chicken. And she arrives at the bridge, and the vehicle stalls due to the bikers siphoning the gas earlier in the movie. Thanks, bikers. You fucked it up pretty badly. So Chris activates the reserve fuel tank and starts up the engine again. But because she took so long to realize that and just kept pushing on the gas pedal, the wood of the bridge starts breaking down, and it sinks the van. So Jason, grabs her neck through the van window. And why it was open, I have no fucking clue, because I would have closed that shit immediately. Like, does she want to get killed? But she fends him off and escapes, and she runs into the woods. And she reaches the barn where she runs inside. And the cat and mouse game continues, guys, as Chris hides in the rafters of the barn. And, Jason, breaks the window to get his hands free of, the car window. Chases after her and tries to open the door, and then when he gets inside, because Chris couldn't get the right barricade, she just used a fucking shovel to barricade it. Jason uses the actual a piece of wood to barricade the door to make sure she won't escape, and then he starts to search for her fruitlessly everywhere inside, not knowing that she's hanging herself up in the rafters above. Not in the way that I said it, although that would have been great. She's basically just hiding from him above the rafters. And he's pissed, right? Like, he's fucking mad as shit that he can't find her. And when Jason finally decides to look up, he sees Chris, but Chris decides to drop down on him, knocking him down for a moment. And Jason grabs his machete and nearly hits Chris. And did she really think that would work? Like, trying to drop down and hurt him? Like, just so fucking dumb. Like, but I guess she figured maybe she would have an easy time escaping. But getting the piece of wood out of the barricade. But apparently she didn't, because it took her because she just failed to get out of there. So she runs upwards toward the loft with Jason in pursuit, and she manages to knock the killer unconscious with a shovel. So then she decides to do a pretty cool and smart move, which is she wraps a noose around his neck and hangs him from the barn's hayloft. So now, believing that Jason's finally dead, even though we all know he's not, Chris tries to leave the barn, but by finding an item to get the piece of wood off the door so she can get out, and she breaking the barricade Jason had made, and she opens the barn doors to reveal the killer hanging motionlessly, but he's not dead. Oh no, not yet. What a shocker. No, to her horror, Jason shows himself to be still alive and kicking. Thank God he does, because this movie is less entertaining without him. So, and he slides up the noose, and he takes his mask off to make room for him to escape the noose, and he shows his deformed face in the process. And Chris is terrified to recognize Jason as the man who attacked her in the woods 2 years before. So Jason gets off, he advances towards Chris, and he raises his machete to kill her at last. But before he can finish her off, Ali suddenly appears and comes to the rescue to try to save Chris, and what a shocker. He fucking struggles with Jason, and predictably, Jason overpowers him again and chops off his right arm, which is awesome. And finally gets rid of this, fucking pointless character and hacks him to death multiple times with his machete. But this does give Chris a good opportunity to be finally aware of her surroundings and look for something to actually, defeat Jason with. So while Jason's busy with Ali, Chris picks up a nearby lumberjack axe and sneaks up behind the ruthless killer, and just as Jason begins to turn his attention back towards Chris, she buries the axe right into his forehead. But even this wound, isn't enough, and he still comes right towards Chris trying to grab her. And it's actually looks pretty cool when Jason's coming towards the camera. It looks like he's trying to come after you. But suddenly, he collapses, and supposedly he's dead. So Chris stumbles down to the lake shore, and she rows away in a canoe, just like in part 1. And the next morning, she comes to, and Chris starts, being scared by small things everywhere. Like trees and fucking ducks and all that shit. And she's horrified to see an unmasked and bloody Jason glare at her through the cabin windows and then barge out of the door running towards her. And I'm honestly, I hate to admit it, but it's kind of fucking hilarious when Jason's just smiling and ready to kill her ass. I actually kind of think it's a bit funny, and I kind of wasn't taking it seriously. I can't take her Chris seriously in certain moments. She's just too fucking goofy at certain points. Her and Jason just have they're more like, it's just funny seeing their back and forth and their struggles and how clumsy they are, and their good points and their low points. And after frantically trying to escape, and she's screaming, and Chris looks up to see that the cabin door is still intact, and Jason is nowhere to be found, and she figures that it was just a hallucination. But her relief soon ends, because what pops out of the water? Why, it's none other than the rotting corpse of Pamela Voorhees, who leaps out of the lake, and she drags Chris underneath the surface of the water. And Chris later wakes up, realizing that it was all a nightmare. Wow, what a great, inverted scene of part 1. Why Jason's mother's in the lake and why her head's attached is beyond me, but considering it's considered to be a dream, I guess that, it doesn't really matter. But I still love it because it's a nice inversion of part 1 scene, and I do love seeing Pamela make her a bit of a reappearance. The last scene shows a policeman escorting a traumatized Chris out of the cabin and into a police car as she screams and laughs hysterically, and the audience begins to wonder if the events of this movie has cost Chris her sanity. And yeah, it really does, I kind of do wonder that. And if I'm being honest, that this scene does make me sympathize with Chris a little bit, but it's kind of too little too late, because like this is the only thing that's kind of made me feel for her, was her losing her sanity after the events of this movie. That was probably the only thing that actually made me feel something for Chris, because otherwise she was boring as shit throughout this movie. But I'll get into that more later when I get into my thoughts on her as a character in my outro. And meanwhile, the camera cuts to Jason's motionless body just lying among the ground, and with the axe still plunged into his head. And the movie ends with the camera making one final cut to the sinister waters of Crystal Lake. So that's the end of the film, but we of course have some more extra stuff, as we have special features, which is a true tradition that I love to keep throughout these movie reviews, and this is no exception. So, as I mentioned in the intro, there are a couple of stuff. We'll talk about each one individually. So first we have Fresh Cuts 3D Terror. Now the main thing about this one is they talk about the original. There's a couple things they talk about, but I'll mention a few things. So the first thing I liked was that they talk about the original plan for Friday the 13th Part 3 with Ginny. So apparently there's been, Amy Steele has talked about this as well. There was originally a plan for Part 3 with Ginny, and I don't know how this didn't make it past. There's been stuff that says that Amy Steele declined, to star in another movie, or that her agents asked for more money or something like that, or Paramount wanted all the money and wasn't willing to give her the amount she wanted. Either way, whatever the reason is, Amy Steele has since said that she regrets, not taking Part 3, and honestly, I kind of see where she's coming from, because, guys, Ginny is my favorite final girl. I made that clear in my Part 2 review. So if she had come back with Part 3, it would have been so fucking awesome. Oh, it would have made Part 3 so fucking better if she was in it. It would have had a better final girl and maybe even a more interesting story. But they just wanted to keep new characters, and I get it. Sometimes that makes sense. But Ginny was such an engaging final girl. She could have really been a great character to focus on for a movie or two afterwards. It sucks that we never got another movie with Ginny. I would have loved it.
When they decided to do Friday Part 3, there actually were some alternate ideas tossed around before they came up with the final script. Originally, Steve Miner wanted to take the character of Ginny Field from the second film, which was played by Amy Steele. The idea was to sort of have her have to deal with her experiences of dealing with Jason. She's now in a sanitarium, and she's having nightmares and visions, and murder started occurring in the sanitarium. They don't know, is it somebody else, is it Jason? But they sort of decided that that wouldn't really give the fans what they wanted. Also, they couldn't secure the return of Amy Steele. She didn't want to return to the role at the time.
There's also other things that they talk about, such as the 3D being a bigger focus than the story and the characters. A lot of the actors, especially the actor of Shelley, Larry Zerner, talks about how director Steve Miner really didn't focus on story and characters as much in this one. It was more about focusing on the 3D technology. He didn't give any cues on how what the characters should do, what the actors should do with their characters, or how the story, how to do the story right. None of that shit. He just wanted to make a good 3D movie, and it seemed like it was worth it for that time. But nowadays, that might have been a mistake, because it's debatable whether Part 3 was hindered by this or not. But I like to think that it was, because making the 3D a bigger focus was really not necessary. Story and characters should always be the main focus. I understand the 3D technology was new and they needed to iron it out and kick it out, but you do need to give some cues to your to your actors who are playing these characters and tell them what they're going to do with these characters and how to do the story right. Another cool thing too is they talk about alternate endings to Part 3. There is one that did make it into Part 3's novelization, which hopefully I'll read one day, and maybe we'll talk about that one. And then there was another one that they also planned that they filmed, but they never, they decided to not use it because it didn't seem to work. So they went with the final one, and it's pretty interesting, all the alternate endings. They seem to have a common theme of, Chris having a hallucination, but there seemed to be that the hallucination they tried to hint towards, the hallucination, ultimately killing Chris, but then, revealing it was a dream and that she's alive. It's pretty cool though, hearing all these alternate endings and what the movie could have ended like had it not been, Pamela coming out of the water, and it had it been the other two endings. At least they didn't go to waste, and we still do get to see them and hear them. So that's cool, at least.
The ending changed 3 times from the original ending.
The film is basically the same up to the end where Chris thinks she defeats Jason. She hits him in the head with an axe and she goes to sleep. Then she wakes up, and at that point, that's when the endings really veer off. The original scripted ending had her waking up and going into the barn and discovering all her friends are dead. And Jason returns, and she actually decapitates him with a sickle.
Which you can read in the novelization if you ever catch up on that.
But the producers at the time felt that that would be too definitive in terms of killing Jason. They wanted to leave it open. So when it came down to shoot a new ending, Petru Popescu devised an idea of having Chris wake up in a canoe. She thinks she's safe. She runs to the lodge and she sees Rick.
Even though we know he's dead, but she sees him in the house, and she gets out of the canoe and runs down in front of the cabin, and you see Rick in the house running parallel.
And the camera tracks them both, and then she runs to the front door, opens it, expecting to see Rick. And it's actually Jason.
And he takes her head off.
And then she wakes up. It's just all been a dream. And they actually filmed this ending.
Why they didn't use it, I don't know. I remember watching them film it, and it was terrific, and I thought that it would have been great.
The producers decided that they really want to kind of go back to the classic idea of Jason kind of bursting through something or coming out of the water. So they scrapped that ending, and they devised a new one, which has Chris waking up again in the canoe. She sees Jason at the window, and suddenly he disappears, and she doesn't know what's going on, and Mrs. Voorhees pops out of the water at her, sort of recreating the ending of the original Friday the 13th, where Jason jumps out of the water. So it sort of brings the whole idea full circle.
And finally, like I mentioned before, they talk about the popularity of Friday the 13th Part 3 due to the 3D being popular at the time. So 3D was huge. It was making a resurgence back in the early 80s, and this movie was a product of its time, clearly, because it worked for that time period, and they were talking about how it was #1 for, I think 2 or 3 weeks. They were talking about how popular it was for a while, and while it may, like I said, while it may have been good for that time, it might have hindered the movie's rewatch value overall in the future. And thankfully, there's more movies after this, because had this truly been the last one, it would have been maybe not the best note to end on. And then, obviously, next you have Legacy of the Mask. And this pretty much just goes into Jason's famous hockey mask. It just goes into what made it iconic, who they say made up with the idea, got the idea of the hockey mask. It's been debated. Some people have said Steve Miner has. Other people have said the 3D supervisor came up with the idea. But generally, whoever it was, they both did a fantastic job, because the hockey mask was a very good idea. And honestly, as much as I love Potato Sack Jason in Part 2, it was really great to see Jason finally don his hockey mask. And, it's famous for a reason. It's iconic for a reason. And they go into detail on that, so if you want to hear all about that, you can, listen to that. And then you have slasher films going for the jugular. And this pretty much just goes into slasher films in general. So Well, it doesn't really seem to. It's not part 3 related, or it's not. Well, it kind of is in a little bit, but it's not solely based on part 3's production or Friday the 13th as a franchise. It's more into slasher films in general, as it talks about actors who have portrayed Jason, actors who have played Michael Myers in their franchise. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I believe, might have been included at one point. So it pretty much just goes into the main, the big slashers, and what made them big and what made them popular. So if you want to hear more about not just Jason but other famous slashers that you like, I think this is, you might like that one. You also have Lost Tales from Camp Blood Part 3, which is, of course, the third part of the short film series. I think this is the best one out of the 3 so far. It actually did look pretty good, and it wasn't too bad. Obviously, it doesn't look as good as it could have been. The blood at certain points does look kind of shitty, but other than that, it's not a bad short film. I'd say check it out if you want to see something. If you're interested, it's definitely the best one of the 3 at this point. So I would recommend, if you want to watch a short film, Friday the 13th, you can check out this one. We'll see how the other ones stack up against it. And then, of course, finally, you have the original theatrical trailer, and I like the theatrical trailer, and I also love how the narrator, I think it does the same countdown shtick as the past 2 movies. But it also, says, join Jason in the woods if you dare. I love how it says that. Kind of daring you to watch this movie, being bold and saying this movie's even scarier because it's in 3D, and you better watch out because and be on the lookout because if you're joining Jason in the woods, beware because you may be his next victim in 3. Basically capitalizing off the 3D experience. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. I definitely think out of all of them, Fresh Cuts 3D Terror seems to have the most amount of stuff that is interesting. At least goes into part 3 specifically. The rest kind of either go into, the other ones go into Jason's hockey mask and, the slasher film genre in general. And then you have the short film and the theatrical trailer. So Fresh Cuts 3D Terror definitely goes into the part 3, behind the scenes the best. So if you want that, I'd say go check that one out. So yeah, that's it for the review. So let's get into my thoughts and, final rating for this film. I'm going to give Friday the 13th Part 3 3 stars out of 5. So we can start with either the positives or negatives. It doesn't really matter, but I'll just go into the positives first of the film. So to start off, I really like the kills in this movie. I think they popped off well. I think, even though the 3D is very eye-straining and, it doesn't look very well today, and I wish they would do a current 3D updated version of it. I do think some kills popped off well, and I'm glad at least I didn't have to wear the glasses because that would have been annoying. I mean, it's still painful to look at. But I do think some moments did pop off well and, better than others. And I think the kills were overall creative. I loved Vera's death with with the spear gun into the eye. I love Debbie's kill where she got killed under the, a little bit callback to Kevin Bacon's kill in the first movie where she gets a knife stuck under the bed. I love Rick's kill, his eyeball kill, where they pop out his eyeball. I think that really looks good on 3D, and it just is. It's pretty goofy and funny, but it's just a deliciously campy kill. I'll say that. But I love the variety and the creativity on that kill. And Chili's was great, and how they got the hot fire poker through her chest. That was creative too. So overall, I love the kills, and I think they were both creative and they popped well off the screen. I had no issues with that. Now, I did like some of the characters, about half of them, and the other half I didn't like. So, the ones that I liked were the pot-smoking couple, Chili and Chuck. I thought they were pretty fun. They were pretty entertaining together. They had some fun and banter between each other and great moments. I also think they were just chilled and relaxed, and they looked like the type of people I would be okay with hanging out with. They just had likable personalities, and I think the actors did a good job with them. But who I really liked in this film was Vera and Shelley. I really think Vera and Shelley should have been the final duo of the film, because they were by far the best characters of the main cast. They both had great stories, great character arcs, great characteristics, and great chemistry. Everything was awesome with them. For Vera, I like that she grows to like Shelley throughout the course of the film and doesn't judge him by appearance, but rather personality. So she's put off by it at first, but she's willing to go through with it and give him a chance. She doesn't just write him off because of his weight or how he looks. She gets to know the real Shelley, and she does hate what he does with the pranks, but she grows to like him as the film goes on and learns more about the real him. And I like that, and she has a little bit of spunk to her too. So she just is a nice girl that could have been a good final girl. I feel like Vera has more personality and is much more entertaining, and would have been a better choice for a final girl than Chris, because she just feels like she's the type of person who I could see fighting back, and she has a likable personality and has a good arc with growing to like Shelley by his personality and not by his appearance, and giving him a chance. And I like that. It's something new that we don't see often. Normally people would just be like, ew, I don't like his weight, or I don't like how he looks, and I find his sense of humor annoying. I'm not gonna pay him any mind, and I'm just gonna fucking leave him alone. But she doesn't do that. She gives him a chance, and genuinely likes him as himself, and doesn't write him off. So that's something that probably normally wouldn't happen in the slasher movie, but they do that, and I like the variety on that. And Shelley is really relatable because he's that outsider who just uses pranks to get attention, and you feel sympathy for him because all he wants is recognition and love from his friends. He doesn't do the pranks he does to be an asshole. He does them because he wants, to be loved and respected by his friends. He wants to feel welcome. He doesn't want to feel like the odd man out, the burden, the guy who, is a troublesome person to be around. He wants to be likable. He wants to gain a connection with everybody. And I think that's something that, everybody can relate to, and can sympathize with Shelley for his motives, because we understand why he does what he does, and I don't hate him for it. And I do think Larry Zerner brings a nice performance to it, and I like that he still champions the franchise to this day and other horror franchises, and I like what he's done with himself, and I genuinely think he's a cool guy, and his character's just great, and he was the only one who and his character even got brought back to the Friday the 13th video game. So that's how much how likable this character was, and you would think a comedic character can go one of two ways. They can either be really entertaining and fun and the best character of the film or the TV show you're watching, or they can be annoying as shit, not funny, drag everything down, and can be, a burden, and, not be fun to watch. Shelley is like a likable comedic person because he has more than just his comedy supporting him. He has good intentions and, wants to, make friends with everybody and wants that recognition because he wants to feel welcome into a friend group. He feels like he's nothing without the pranks. He feels like he's just it makes him lonely, and it just makes him feel like the odd man out, and I can completely understand that, and it's a good motive for him to understand his character, and learning to grow through that, and be the real him around Vera is a good thing, because he stops pranking for a little bit after he thinks him and Vera have a connection, and and when he gets turned down the first time, he goes back to doing the pranks, but then Vera is willing to rekindle that again and start a connection again when she sees his wallet and looks at a photo of him and his mom, and they just have a good bonding experience over the convenience store with the bikers. So I feel like had they survived the movie together, it would have been great. Final duo that final couple that survived the movie. I feel like they could have bonded over it and had a good could have grown through that and been a great and could have been a unique couple that we hadn't that we don't see often. And I just think Shelley was the best character in this film and he really deserves all the love that Friday the 13th fans give him. I don't think he's overrated or anything. He's a good character and we understand why he does the things he does, and it's just good. That's what makes a likable final that's what makes a likable character. So I appreciate that. And finally, I think Jason was really good in this film. I don't think it's as good as Steve Dash's portrayal of Part 2 Jason, but I like Part 3 Jason. I think Richard Brooker brings a new thing to his role. I think he finally gets to sport the hockey mask in this film and gets to finally change his look and be the Jason that we all know and love. So after after 2 films of it, and the third one, we finally get the Jason we like, and this is actually the Part 3 mask, so this is pretty cool. And I just like Brooker's physicality with Jason. I like his movements. He has the right size of Jason. He's very hulking, and he walks like Jason and acts like, and this guy just feels like Jason. And his attitude is great. I love whenever he's fucking pissed off when he can't find his victim and he throws shit on the fucking ground. He's throwing hay around trying to find Chris, and he gets pissed at certain moments. But he also shows a little bit of humor and sinisterness when he smiles at Chris, when he takes his mask off and smiles a little bit, kind of like a devious smile. I like that because it shows how sinister he is and it makes him creepy, but it also is kind of funny because it gives him a bit of personality. Like, he's pretty confident and cocky. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna fucking get you and I'm gonna kill you," and it's just funny. Like, it shows a little bit of personality with him. And I do think that and I think Jason overall is just really really great. I think he was portrayed well in this one. I also like how casual Jason is about the kills that he does in this movie. He doesn't relish in them like Freddy or Michael Myers. He just simply kills someone and is like, all right, on to the next one. He doesn't he doesn't drag it out or anything. He does it, he gets it over with, on to the next one. It's just like work. He just sees it as work to get his dead mother back to life. He doesn't see it as anything other than to just fill his mother's wish of killing the camp counselors and trying to maybe bring her back to life, which I think is implied in the second film with her head. And she does show up with with that jump scare at the end where she fucking comes out of the lake and does a Jason in the first part and grabs Chris. And even though it's a dream sequence, it's pretty effective, I'll say that. But the one thing I think Richard Brooker's Jason that I don't really like about it is I don't really like when he grunts in pain. I don't really think that really works for Jason. I think it's a simple stabbing, falling down, and just rolling around and using his movements to show that he's in pain is better than him going "Urgh." Like, I don't need to hear him grunt like that. I think it's better to just show and not tell. Jason, is all about movement and physicality, so I feel like we should stick to that and not, use his voice in any way or, show that, tell that he's in pain by making grunt noises. It just sounds off and doesn't seem like something that Jason should be doing. Breathing's fine. Like with Kane Hodder, I don't mind that he breathes and, fucking looks like a menacing guy. But grunting is a different story. I just don't think it works for him. But yeah, that leads well into my negatives as well. We got into the positives. So the kills were great. The Chuck and Chili and Vera and Shelley were all great characters. Jason was all around good. Just the grunting wasn't the best thing. But now let's get on to the negatives of the film. So first off, I think the atmosphere is very non-existent and is completely gone compared to the first two films. Whereas in the first two films, you had a nice summer camp vibe to the first two films, and but you had this looming threat in the woods. In this one, they don't really recapture that, and it just feels different. And variety is good, and being different is good, but sometimes it doesn't always land. And here, I just think the location isn't as boring, because Jason just chills out in a barn for most of the film, and I feel like that's where a lot of the film takes place, and it's really annoying because the barn isn't interesting at all, and it just feels like we're in one location for too long, and it feels like there's no variety to the setting, and it's just boring, and there's not really much atmosphere going with it either. And it just could have been a lot better had they maybe capture that same vibe where you feel like you're on a getaway trip with your friends at this resort, but you feel a looming threat somewhere in the woods and you don't feel quite comfortable. Like they don't really capture that like they do in the first two films, so I think that's bad. However, my biggest negative for me in this film is the other half of the characters. Jesus Christ, guys, like, despite how good some of the characters are, the other half are downright terrible. They are not great. And it's not like they're I wouldn't say like downright awful or anything, just like they're boring. Like, take Andy and Debbie, for instance. We'll start with them. The pregnant chick and the dude that does walks on his hands, right? That's Andy and Debbie. They're fucking boring. They're bland. They got no personality, no characteristics to them, no arcs, nothing there. They got no chemistry. They just are boring as shit. They're just a couple that want to fuck each other, and that's it. That's all they are. They're just an excuse to get tits in the film, and I get it. Sex is a big part of Friday the 13th, and that's all we want. That's what we want to see. A nice little sexy time. I get that, but you need to at least have something likable about the characters. In part two, the whole cast was that they all had each an aspect that was likable about them. Here, there's none of that. They're fucking boring as shit. There's nothing likable about them, and they just feel useless. The only thing interesting about Andy and Debbie is their deaths. Andy gets a nice gruesome death with a machete down the fucking crotch, and Debbie gets a nice death with a nice callback to Kevin Bacon's kill, where she gets stabbed under the bed. That's cool. That's all great. And heck, when Andy's like hanging over the ceiling while she notices him, and then she get fucking stabs under, that's pretty good scene, pretty nice kill scene, pretty good. But that's the only thing good about their characters. Just that, there's nothing besides that. And it just really, but nothing but that would have been fine, and I would have forgiven that, but I think we need to go into the main duo, Chris and Rick. Now, Andy and Debbie are acceptable. I may not like that they're boring. You might have a dud of characters in an ensemble cast, and that's fine. Not every character is going to be strong. But Jesus Christ, if you're going to you need to have a compelling main two protagonists, the surviving final couple, and these two were just not it. They were the wrong choice to make the surviving couple. And like I said, it really should have been Vera and Shelley, because these two were terrible. Again, no chemistry, no personality or characteristics, boring and bland. Nothing there. It just is they just have an uninteresting relationship, nothing compelling about them. On their own, they're not interesting. Rick doesn't feel interesting at all, both by himself. He doesn't feel interesting. He barely does anything by himself. And with Chris, he's got no chemistry with her. He's got no arc with her or anything. There's nothing to their relationship, and all they talk about is just how they broke up like a while back and then got back together. They don't say why they broke up or what made that, just because I guess Chris got scared of Jason and, you know, got socially distant. But with Chris, she's supposed to be our final girl, right? We had two fantastic final girls. You had Alice, who had a bit of an edge on her, you know, smoked, a cigarette, or weed, and, you know, had a little bit to drink. She had good chemistry with her co-stars. She was a likable final girl, and she stepped up when she needed to, where she acted scared, but she wasn't useless, and, you know, would fight off Mrs. Voorhees, but wouldn't kill her because she didn't want to kill her. She just wanted to get out of there and, you know, just, you know, be left alone. But she knew she had to when Mrs. Voorhees, you know, once it clicked in her head that Mrs. Voorhees was never going to leave unless she killed her. Ginny was fantastic because she had the psychology angle, and she, you know, sympathized with Jason and tried to get in his head and, you know, fought him off, but had her moments of, you know, fear as well. She wasn't like she had a balance. With Chris, there's nothing there. She has her moments of fighting back against Jason, and I will applaud that, and I do sympathize with her when she, you know, it looks like she loses her sanity at the end. I do feel bad for her at the end when it feels like she's lost her sanity after losing her friends, and she might have to go to a mental, hospital after this. And she does have a good amount of, you know, fighting back against Jason, you know, a couple good moments. But they're not balanced by... But they're balanced by weak moments where she makes a lot of dumb decisions. And final girls do make stupid decisions, but she doesn't offset that by having a likable personality or any arc to her. She's just very boring because there's just nothing there with her. She talks about the story about how she's attacked by Jason in the woods like 5 years prior, which not only doesn't really feel like it adds up in the timeline for Friday, but it also I just don't like the implications behind that scene, and I explained that in my review, and I just don't, and that's supposed to be like a way for us to sympathize with her and care about her, but I don't really feel any sympathy towards her when she tells it, because I don't like how what's implied in that scene. I think it just is offbeat from what Jason would normally do, and it just doesn't, it doesn't do anything to Chris's character that makes her interesting. Like, there's just nothing there with her. No personality, really. Whereas with Vera and Shelley, I can point out a couple things that they did well. With Chris, I can't point out anything. And I understand Chris has a fan base, and there are people that like Chris as a final girl and think that she gets a lot of hate. But for me personally, I don't think she's a good final girl. She's just very boring. She doesn't have really much to her. She just does a lot to her. The stupid thing she does is really stupid. More stupid than what Ginny and Alice would do. Like, with Ginny and Alice, you can make excuses on why they make the stupid decisions they do. You can make a headcanon on it. Or you can imply why they made that decision. With Chris, I have no fucking idea what she was thinking, and she makes a lot of stupid choices against Jason, as many times as she does good choices. So to me, the problem with Chris is just simply she's boring. She's not a bad character. She's not the worst character. She has her moments, and the moments where you're supposed to be frightened with her, you know, when she's in the boat and she sees Jason and she's trying to run away. Anytime she runs away with Jason, I just fucking laugh because of how goofy and silly it is. And I get it's like an 80s horror movie, and Friday the 13th in and of itself is kind of a campy horror. But even then, like, I should care about what happens to the final girl, and I don't give a shit about what happens to Chris, because there's nothing there for her. She's just simply a boring character, a blank sheet of paper who has nothing more to her, no dimensions, nothing really likable about her. I have nothing to attach to her compared to Ginny with her psychology and her, you know, spunkiness and her likability. You know, Ginny had a lot. Take Ginny, my favorite final girl, right? Amy still had a lot of natural charisma with her co-star and, you know, just herself. She was very, you know, she had a lot of spunk and, you know, had a bit of psychology. We knew more about her backstory and what she was like and what she was doing. And we felt sympathy for her. We felt for her and we cared about her because she was a likable final girl that we got to see interact with her friends and do all the shit with. Chris barely interacts with like her friends and doesn't do that much with them, and doesn't have that same chemistry with the co-stars. And I think it's because they didn't really give direction like they did in the first two films and just focused too much on the 3D. But that's a problem because I should be caring about the final girl, and instead I don't really care. I just don't give a shit, and that's a shame. So yeah, I mean, when it boils down to it, Chris is just boring, plain and simple. There's nothing more to her, and if you find something likable about her, I commend you for it. But I just don't see what's great about her character. I don't see what makes her likable to people. If you can explain it to me, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. What makes you like Chris as a character? What compels you about her? Because to me, there's nothing to attach to with her. Where compared to Alice and Ginny, where I can attach something to them, and there's something about them that I like, and I think, and that's just the simple truth of it. But I'm not attacking Dana Kimball. She does the best with what she's got. She just wasn't given much direction and much things to do, and some of her acting in places is kind of corny and a bit, a little funny, but that's basically what it comes down to. So that's basically what it is. She's just a blank character, nothing interesting or engaging about her. So we'll end it there. So at the end of the day, guys, would I recommend this Friday the 13th film? Is it worth is this film worth watching for fans and newcomers of the Friday the 13th franchise? No, I do not recommend it. It might be the same score as the original Friday the 13th, but compared to that original film, the original film, I feel like I can go back to at a when I feel it like I'm in the right mood. Despite its negatives, I feel like I can go back to it. With Part 3, I don't feel like I can. Like, Part 3, if I watch it, I just, watch it, and then, I forget about it, like, afterwards. I'm just like, oh, it exists. That's what it is. It exists. It's just there. It's not good or bad. Just plain, it's there. But it doesn't leave a lasting impact with you. It doesn't make you want to rewatch it that much. It's just a very bland and forgettable movie that doesn't stand out in any way. It just could have done a lot more, and what they really should have done is do better with the atmosphere, but they should have made the characters more interesting, especially the main duo. They should have been a lot more likable, more interesting, and they just dropped the ball with it. And, like I said, it just, it was not handled well. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 3. Do you like it? Do you think I'm being too harsh on the film? Do you enjoy this film? If you do, please tell me why. I'm sure you'll tell me why you enjoy Chris as a final girl, or, any other aspects of Friday the 13th. And I'm all for it. I would love to hear about it. I want to know what makes you guys like Part 3 so much, if at all. Do you hate this film? I would be interested in that. Like, do you just, you can't watch it, it's a terrible film? Or are you like me, where you're somewhere in the middle, where it's really just average, and it's just bland and forgettable. It exists, but it doesn't do anything to really make it, stand out among the pack, and it isn't an amazing film in any way, but isn't downright awful compared to other Friday movies. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to leave them in the comments below and let me know. And subscribe for more Friday the 13th content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. We'll bring back Jason soon. If you guys want more Friday content, please voice that in the comment section of this video, and I will most certainly do more Friday the 13th reviews. But even then, I do plan to do. There should be 2 Friday the 13th next year. That will be on later on next year, which will be a while from now, but that'll give me a chance to cover 2 films in the same year, and it'll be fun. And my favorite film is coming up soon, so it'll be really exciting to tackle that film. And I do have the Friday the 13th, some Friday the 13th gaming videos, and I'm sure I'll get back to that one day, and, to finish it off. But, I got reviews of the first 2 films about Jason if you want to see them, and, Jason's not going to go away anytime soon. I love the Hockey Mask Killer. He's my favorite slasher. I really enjoy him. I just think this is one of his more forgettable and bland movies, but it's definitely not the worst in the franchise. There's definitely way worse movies, and we'll get to those when they come. But yeah, there's definitely more Friday the 13th content coming soon. Maybe not as often as some other content, but it will be there soon. It just depends on the demand, how much you guys really want it. So if you want it, please voice it, and we'll continue doing it. Otherwise, I'll do it when the next Friday the 13th rolls around. And you can also follow me on Facebook, where I have discussions about things we talk about on both my channels, and Twitch, where I hope to live stream in the future. So, in my next video, because this was the Halloween special, and I kind of interrupted it with a Friday the 13th Part 3 review, which I don't really care, because I love this, I love Jason, and I love talking about Friday the 13th, so it doesn't matter for me. We will continue with another Let's Play video of the Corpse Party 2021 PS4 video game. I don't know how far I've gotten into the game. I don't know how many videos I've gotten, but whatever part is upcoming next, I hope you guys enjoy that. And, as I'm filming this very early on in the year, so I don't know how many videos I've gotten of Corpse Party at this moment. But it'll be very exciting. I'm sure I'll voice how exciting it will be to play the game with you guys, and experience that with you guys. So if you're into Corpse Party, you want to see me play the PS4 game, please go check that out. And whatever parts were uploaded beforehand, or if I haven't started it yet, I should soon, or I should in the next video. So basically check that out if you're interested. So thank you guys so much for watching and joining me for this video, and I'm sorry if I maybe sound a bit less enthusiastic than maybe I was in previous reviews. Like I said, it's just a bland and forgettable movie. There's not much to really say about it. It's average. It exists. And I'm glad it's not the final film in the trilogy, because apparently that's what originally was supposed to be. This was supposed to be the final film. Thank fucking God it wasn't. But next film, we're gonna have a very misleading title, which was supposed to be the final film, and we'll get onto that, and that'll be very exciting to tackle. But thank you guys so much again for watching this video, and as always, peace out.